Eh bien, Votre Excellence, Mesdames et Messieurs, bonsoir. Sehr verehrte Damen und Herren, guten Abend, herzlich willkommen. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special session on perceiving Arctic change. My name is Jan Boom. I'm professor at the University of Versailles-Saint-Quentin-en-Yvelines, associate member of the University of Paris-Saclay, co-organizing this event together with our colleagues and friends from the German Polar Institute, Alfred Wegener. In Germany, you don't need to introduce the Polar Institute. It's very famous and extremely prestigious. You might not still be so familiar with the University of Paris-Saclay. It is right now the biggest French university, representing 13% of France's research potential. And it is actually ranked right now in place number 13 in the famous Shanghai ranking. So we're at a very prestigious level here of research and cooperation in Arctic research, a rapidly expanding field, and we're looking forward to this evening, which will be moderated by Grace. Please, Grace, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Guten Tag, bonjour, dobry den, and hello from me. My name is Grace Dobush. I'm a journalist here in Berlin, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to the latest event in the Perceiving Arctic Change series, Perspectives of Franco-German Scientific Cooperation. I am looking forward to being a part of this discussion this evening to commemorate the opening of the new graduate school, Perceiving Arctic Change, Climate, Society, Sustainability. And it's also a very exciting week as the Nobel Prize in Physics just went to some climate forecasting scientists, and also the EU Parliament and Commission are discussing new Arctic strategies for Europe. But before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to turn your phones off, at least the sound off, or put it in airplane mode. This event is being live streamed around the world via the French Embassy of Berlin's YouTube channel. But if you would like to tweet about the event, please feel free to share your thoughts with the hashtag PACCSS. If you would like to be part of that discussion online and encourage the conversation around the globe. First, this evening, I would like to welcome to the stage Your Excellency Anne-Marie Descotes, the Ambassador of France to Germany.
Good evening. Dear Professor Boitius, dear Professor Bouy, dear Professor Menz, ladies and gentlemen. Global climate change is one of the major threats to humanity, affecting regions of the world in many different ways. Siberia and Canada were struggling this summer with the highest temperatures ever recorded, with incredibly high temperatures of 2 to 5 degrees Celsius above average for January-June in Siberia, while France had the coldest summer since 2014 and torrential rain devastated Western Germany. The Arctic region is nowadays the region where temperatures increase the fastest in the world. And at the same time, the Arctic Ocean is key to regulating our planet's climate. As scientists say, what happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. And the consequences of environmental and climate changes in the circumpolar north are to be felt everywhere on Earth. Global climate change cannot be stopped by a single country alone. It requires a joint effort by the international community, but also the mobilization of non-state actors such as citizen associations, financial institutions, companies, researchers. The knowledge gained step to step by our scientists, their expertise and their understanding of the complex mechanism that induce those climate changes is essential for anticipating the consequences of climate change and taking appropriate action to mitigate it. For this reason, I'm very happy to be here tonight. Thank you for having me here for the opening session of this exciting French-German event. And I beg your pardon, I will not be able to stay long because, as you know, some things are happening here in Germany on political level, and I have to go back to my office, but I'm sure the discussion will be pretty exciting. So I convey my warmest thanks to Professor Antje Boitius, Director of the Alfred Wegener Institute, who kindly invited the French Embassy to participate, and Professor Alain Buy, President of the Université of Versailles Saint-Quentin, who is French partner from the Wegener Institute on the academic side. We also celebrate tonight the opening of a new doctoral school between AWI and AWI and UVSQ, dedicated to the perception of climate change in the Arctic region. In this respect, I'm pleased to greet Professor Olivier Mentz, President of the Franco-German University, which supports this joint initiative. The Alfred Wegener Institute and the University of Versailles Saint-Quentin have both built up a solid expertise in Arctic studies. The Alfred Wegener Institute's Helmholtz Center for Polar and Marine Research in Bremen is one of the main marine research institutions and the leading one in Germany on studies of polar areas. Their research program, Marine, Coastal and Polar Systems, pools the scientific expertise of the Wegener Institute in regard to all geoscientific, biological and climatological research themes in the polar regions, the Arctic Ocean and the coastal and shelf sea regions of the North Sea. Alfred Wegener Institute was also the coordinator and operator of the international expedition Mosaic, conducted on their research ship Polarstern for more than 1 year in 2019-2020. This was a unique scientific adventure involving scientists from 20 different countries and helped collecting a great amount of data for a better understanding of the complex climate mechanism affecting the Arctic area. We at the French Embassy were pleased to celebrate the return of the Polarstern last November through a joint German-French conference involving experts from both countries. The Versailles Saint-Quentin University combines natural science with a social science approach. Arctic studies at UVSQ includes the international interdisciplinary master's program Arctic Studies and the workshop series for master's and PhD students Gateway to the Arctic, organized annually in cooperation with the Alfred Wegener Institute since 2011. This cooperation is now being strengthened with the creation of the Doctoral College Perceiving Arctic Change, Climate Society and Sustainability, which will begin this year and which is a perfect example of how we can work together in order to better understand the causes and consequences of climate change and use this as a basis for implementing the necessary policy decision at international level. Europe is at the forefront in the fight against climate change. In December 2015 was agreed upon the Paris Climate Agreement, which has been signed by 94 countries worldwide in the meantime. Last year, the European Commission adopted the European Green Deal, aiming at climate neutrality by 2050. This shows our common determination to seriously tackle the climate challenges. Climate change mitigation will undoubtedly remain high on our country's priority agendas. France considers the Arctic to be a very critical area, both from an environmental point of view as well as from the common interest of mankind. With a long history of exploration and expeditions in high latitude regions, France has grown as a true polar nation with permanent scientific presence in both the Arctic and the French Polar Institute Paul Émile Victor, which cooperates with the Alfred Wegener Institute, on our joint Arctic base, AVIPEF, located by Ny-Ålesund on the Spitsberg Island in Norway. Moreover, France adopted in 2016 a national roadmap for the Arctic, which provides a framework to align and prioritize approaches in line with Arctic challenges. With their cooperation, the Alfred Wegener Institute and the Université of Versailles-Saint-Quentin will contribute to connect doctoral programs and increase knowledge on a region at the forefront of the climate crisis. The complementary and transdisciplinary approach is essential, as both the Arctic environment and Arctic societies are heavily affected by climate changes. More than ever, French-German cooperation is and will be needed for Europe to tackle the global challenges that our societies are facing. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a very nice and interesting evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Antje Botius, the director of the Helmholtz Center for Polar and Marine Research, who is joining us remotely.
Yes, hello. Am I heard? Am I seen? Yes. Ah, perfect. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, and thank you to everyone who is there. I wish I could be with you, but I'm greeting you and I'm celebrating a little bit with you remotely because I have the pleasure of opening another project, another pan-European project and graduate school here from Bologna. So I'm in Italy right now, and I'm full of impressions of the first day. It is my first scientific conference and meeting in 2 years now. And today I met with a lot of graduate students and postdocs who are happy that they have a joint graduate school, just as you are celebrating between Versailles and Bremen and Saarbrücken. They are celebrating for their friendship between Venice and Bologna and Bremerhaven, which is nice. And you know, it gives a really good feeling in these times where we pick up again our need for human interaction and collaboration, because that's all what we have as humans to step into the future. And so I'm very, very happy that we together will have this graduate school, and there are more people trained in a special way, in a transdisciplinary way, about how we can learn from our history, from the past and the present, to fight for a better future. So here in Bologna, we talk about the synchronicity between the Arctic and the Antarctic. It is about the paleoscience, the chronologies in paleoclimate archives, as we have in the glacial ice cores that we can compare between Greenland and Antarctica. And today, all the students and scientists presented amazing data from these ice cores that show that this is one system, Earth. It is one planet of a kind, the only one that we know with life on it, the one with a huge ocean, and the one with a humanity, just one humanity. And in the history of humankind, which dates back to more than 1.5 million years, the future is really to resolve the complexity of climate, the interaction with nature and with mankind. And you know, speaking of complexity, you all know and have read that yesterday the Nobel Prize was paid out for the physicists Klaus Hasselmann and Sukuro Manabe and Giorgio Parisi for their research on chaotic processes and random processes and how you can distinguish a trend. In the case of Klaus Hasselmann, a model that links weather and climate, precipitation, demonstrating that short-term phenomena are changing along with long-term developments, such as ocean currents, such as the emission of greenhouse gases. This demonstration, this dedication of such an important prize to this research of complexity is an important sign in these times. And I would like to cite Klaus Hasselmann. He was a director of the Max Planck Institute in Hamburg. I take a quote from 1988, where he said, at that time, in 30 to 100 years, depending on how much fossil fuel we consume, we will face a very significant climate change. Climate zones will shift, precipitation will be distributed differently. Then we will no longer be able to talk about random results. And we should realize that we are entering a situation where there is no turning back. And you know, when we understand our own perspective as humanity, when we understand how often we have knowledge and we can share knowledge that really predates catastrophes, then of course the task is that we combine all knowledge systems, that we learn together how we can be more sensitive, how we can early on predict risks and take action. And the hope that we have is just us. The hope that we have is us who are now on this planet who have to turn the wheels towards a better future. The Arctic plays an important role in it, as the polar systems, the so-called white parts of the Earth, are just a physical, first of all, just a physical component, a climate stabilization factor that we cannot afford to lose. So this hotspot of climate change, and you will soon hear more about all of this research that we are already doing together with France from Bernhard Dirkmann, this Arctic is a sensitive system. It shows in its changes, for example, the sea ice changes, it indicates state of the Earth. Actually, it has become an indicator also of the state of humanity. Will we be able to reverse the trend of a vanishing sea ice or not? And the radical changes that we see in the Arctic, they affect the climate and ecosystems. They affect the realities of all people living around the Arctic, but much beyond the Arctic. You will hear later on, and you will probably discuss this, and this is one of the large tasks of the school that is about to be founded, that the combination of knowledge systems, including indigenous knowledge systems, will be a key to the future. Only few people know that in 2018, a large global study was published that showed that all the lands that are managed by indigenous people have better biodiversity indicators than those that are managed by us with our Western knowledge systems. So how can we combine the best of our knowledge systems, and how can we share the traditions of knowledge and at the same time work for a future that we all want? This will be part of the discussions that this new generation of graduate students will have. With these words, I'm thanking everyone who is working, supporting, and investing in this idea of French-German scholarship, French-German knowledge sharing. And I myself am so happy that we can add this new asset to our long-standing collaboration. This weekend, I will go to Paris, and I will celebrate in Paris the Nuit Polaire. Some of you may have seen it online. We had a fantastic music fest in Bremen, where a concert was carried out by the Insular Orchestra and the Teatro del Baus, where Beethoven's Pastorale celebrated polar life and all life on Earth. And in that spirit, we had a discussion already between our shared knowledge systems, and for us, how France and Germany can collaborate even more for a future. And I wish us all luck, and I wish us all, and you especially that have an evening to share, that you'll get out of this, and that you can live on with this great spirit of friendship that we have, and the great spirit of what we all have to do, namely making the world a little bit better. I wish you a wonderful evening. Bye-bye. À bientôt.
Thank you so much, Antje. And next, I would like to welcome to the stage Olivier Mintz, the president of the Franco-German University in Saarbrücken.
Madame l'ambassadrice, Madame la directrice, que je ne vois plus, Monsieur le Président, oui, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, liebe Doktorandinnen und Doktoranden, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. First, I would like to thank the team from the Alfred Wegener Institute for hosting this event and providing a space for dialogue and exchanging ideas. I'm glad to be here today and to be able to be here in person and to have the honor of speaking to you as president of the Deutsch-Französische Hochschule Université Franco-Allemande, known as the DFH-UFA. Please allow me to briefly introduce my organization. The DFH-UFA was founded in 1997 to strengthen the cooperation between France and Germany in the field of higher education and research. The organization is a university network whose administrative offices are located in Saarbrücken. Today, we have 208 member universities from France, Germany, and third countries. The main mission of the DFH-UFA is to promote joint study programs in France and Germany, and also transnational doctoral programs. About 6,400 students are currently enrolled on 186 joint study courses at bachelor's and master's level. What is more, the DFH-UFA provides support for 25 graduate schools, students doing a binational PhD. The third pillar are scientific events for junior researchers from all disciplines. We have worked with the Alfred Wegener Institutes since 2012, when we received the first application for funding a Franco-German research workshop entitled Gateway to the Arctic. This was followed by successive events which have developed over the last years, and every time we funded these meetings for young researchers. And during the 2019 event in Bremerhaven, I had the wonderful moment of visionary talks with the organizers of the research workshop. One result of this exchange can be seen tonight. I'm delighted that this year marks a high point with the first Franco-German cooperation on a doctoral program in the field of polar research named Perceiving Arctic Change, Climate, Society and Sustainability, PAX. It's a result of the Gateway of the Arctic cooperation between the internationally renowned Alfred Wegener Institute Helmholtz Center for Polar and Marine Research and the University of Paris-Saclay. And it's a big pleasure for us to know that hereby we contribute to the UN Decade on Ocean Research. We're looking forward to seeing the outcomes from these successful combined research programs. I hope we all enjoy interesting discussions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, we have a video message from Alain Bouy, who will be greeting us virtually.
Your Excellency, Madame l'Ambassadrice, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen. I regret not being with you today, but the commitments at home keep me from joining you tonight. My sincere thanks go to all our partners and co-organizers of this great event. The Alfred Wegener Institute for Polar Research, the Franco-German University in Saarbrücken, and the French Embassy in Germany. And many thanks to all of the academics and researchers here today. We are all gathered tonight for the official inauguration of the new graduate school in Arctic Interdisciplinary Studies, Perceiving Arctic Change, founded by the Alfred Wegener Institute and our university, the University of Versailles-Saint-Quentin-en-Yvelines, and supported by the Franco-German University, whose president I would like to sincerely thank for his involvement. This new graduate school will create a regular mobility flows at PhD level to build up Franco-German competence and research in the fast expanding field and major scientific studies that are Arctic studies. This graduate school is the result of a long-lasting Franco-German scientific cooperation. Today, Germany and France have an important role to play in Arctic and polar research, which is becoming a major scientific issue, in particular in the context of climate change. the organization of the second Arctic Science Ministerial in Berlin in 2018 and its fourth edition in Paris in 2023 are great examples of the Franco-German involvement in Arctic studies. Therefore, I'm proud that the University of Versailles-Saint-Quentin-en-Yvelines is part of this great project that we officially inaugurate tonight. As you may know, Arctic studies have indeed played a main role in our university for more than 10 years in an interdisciplinary perspective. In particular, in 2011, we became one of the first 3 associate members of the University of the Arctic. And in December, our university will host the UArctic's Rectors Meeting. Last year, our university founded the Institute of Arctic Research Jean-Mallory Monaco Versailles, directed by the professor Jan Borm and dedicated to the study and pursuit of Jean-Mallory's researchers, one of the greatest international specialists of Arctic studies. This new institute will coordinate the scientific program that will accompany the donation of Jean-Mallory's Arctic collections to the Institute of Oceanography of Monaco Foundation Albert I. As I mentioned, this event tonight is the result of the long-lasting Franco-German scientific cooperation in Arctic studies. Indeed, the collaboration between the Alfred Wegener Institute and our university have been intense in the past 10 years. Apart from various joint research projects and co-publications, we have co-organized the very successful series of workshops entitled Gateway to the Arctic. 7 sessions have been taking place so far, and the 8th workshop is organized this week in Potsdam. Most of them have been funded by the Franco-German University in Saarbrück, and I would like to thank once again its president, Professor Mentz, for the continuous support we have been receiving from his institution. Those workshops are unique opportunities for students from French and German universities to meet and discuss about key Arctic issues. I hope that the years to come will deepen even more the Franco-German cooperation on Arctic studies and allow fruitful scientific exchanges between our 2 countries. I renew my thanks to all the institutions who have made possible the creation of this new graduate school dedicated to Arctic studies. I wish to all of you a pleasant evening.
So next up, we are going to hear presentations from experts in the Arctic. And after that will be a panel discussion with 5 experts, and then we'll follow the official inauguration of the new graduate school. We'll wrap up the evening with a reception for you to meet and mingle and continue the conversation. Because our time is limited this evening, I ask that you save your questions for the presenters until the Q&A session at the end of the panel discussion. So now I would like to welcome to stage Bernhard Diekmann, who's the head of the research unit at Alfred Wegener Institute Potsdam and an adjunct professor for quaternary geology at Potsdam University. His long-term experience as a geoscientist has dealt primarily with climate change of the past in the Alps, East Africa, the Antarctic Ocean, Siberia, and the Tibetan Highlands. Welcome, Bernhard.
Yeah, thank you for introduction. Cher Ambassadeur, chers collègues, bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Ja, einen wunderbaren guten Abend alle Anwesenden und die Interessierten. Now I will switch to English. Yeah, thank you. So, yeah. I was so used to this with a mask. So, and for me, it's also the first presentation after a long time. So the last presentation was 2 weeks before the pandemic.
So, yeah, my talk will deal with some natural science background of what's going on in the Arctic region. And afterwards we will hear more about the human aspects. So let me start with the first figure. So it's not so long ago, a few weeks, that the latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out, and the news was the old news, so it's getting warmer. And yeah, and the reason for this warming, this is human impact. And there's no other way to explain this modern warming by natural causes. And this is done by simulation, for instance, and by modeling experience. And we already, Antje Boitzes mentioned the Nobel Prize. Klaus Hasselmann was one of the colleagues from MPE Hamburg. He was familiar with this modeling approach to show that the human impact causes modern climate change. But on the other hand, you only have to keep your eyes open when you are talking about climate change. So we have so many observations and weather stations. And during my last holiday, I had the pleasure to return back to my study site when I was a student and did my diploma thesis in the Alps. So this gives you an impression of the Rhone Glacier. That's the upper picture shows the situation in summer 1870 when I took the samples there. And now I returned back after more than 30 years, and it looks like this. So the ice disappeared. And the glaciers are a good indication of climate change. They are very sensitive to climate change, and they are part of the cryosphere. And the cryosphere, this is something which we have present today. So there are people who are not so convinced that we have climate change. You know this. And one argument of such people is to tell you, climate change is something fully normal. So, of course, they are right. So climate change is something which appears through all the Earth history. And I have shown you here, this is a gravel fever curve of climate change in Earth's history. So Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, and here are the last 500 million years when life was on Earth. And you see two curves. One is a temperature curve with all these arrow ranges, and the other curve shows you the greenhouse gas concentrations. And what we learned from this is that in addition to the change of the face of the Earth and the arrangement of continents, we have climate change. And actually the times without ice are more prominent in Earth's history. But what we also learned from these messages from the past is that carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gases, always played a big role in shaping the climate. And only the underlying processes were different. So it was in the past magmatism, volcanism, or the biological productivity in the ocean, or weathering with mountain formation. All these geological processes affected our climate system and controlled the climate development. So, and today we are living in an ice age world. So we have ice, we have the cryosphere in Antarctica and the Arctic. The question is only how much of this ice is present. So we have the typical ice ages. The last one was 20,000 years ago, and now we're living in a warm stage in the ice house world. So, and if we don't take care, this situation might change in future. We don't take care. So what we see, so with the temperatures, we are at a modest level, so it's inclining. But with the CO2 levels, we are quite high and approaching values which we also know from earlier stages in Earth history. Okay, that was a look back and what we can learn from the past. And now I want to highlight the role of the Arctic. So I just mentioned it's warming, we have global warming. And one phenomenon is that we have twice as rapid warming in the Arctic realm. And now it also starts in the Antarctic, by the way. So, and this is something we call Arctic amplification. So there are some processes going on which make the Arctic warmer than the rest of the world. And this is something we also know from the geological past. Yeah, this what the and people are often asking, what do I have to do with the Arctic? It's so far away, and yeah, that might be true, but there are processes going on in the polar region which have influence worldwide, which affect us as society. And I have summarized some points, which I also will highlight in some figures next. So we have this polar amplification, we see the melting of glacial ice, we see the loss of sea ice, permafrost plays an important role, changes in permafrost, and of course the responses of the ecology. See it, for instance, with the increase of wildfires at the moment. So, and this brings me to our research focus in the Arctic region. So the Alfred Wegener Institute is doing a lot of Arctic research, and yeah, with a multidisciplinary approach. So we have the glacial people looking at glaciers, we have the marine people looking into the ocean, and the permafrost people. And we are also involved in some of important projects. There's a Nunatak project, for instance. Hugues Lanthuis is here. He can tell you about this. He's dealing exactly with that, what we are talking tonight. So the relationship between science and human responses. Then there's a new project, the Arctic Passion, and Mosaic, of course, which already was mentioned by Antti Boetius. So Mosaic was one of the very prominent projects bringing together many scientists worldwide. And it was a chance to travel through the Arctic Ocean and to look at what we normally do not know, what's happening during the long polar night. Normally we go in summer to that region. So, and here is the leader, Markus Rex, also from Potsdam. You know him from the television, the media, and so that was very successful. But we are now at the stage what came out from these studies. And there I only want to show you one example, which is fully related to this expedition. So you see here's a blue spot in the center of the Arctic map. And this is a minimum in ozone. So this means the message is that ozone loss is still a problem. We know this from Antarctica, basically, but it's also present in the Arctic and changes from year to year. But it's still a problem, and this has to do with climate warming, with processes in the stratosphere, which have effects on ozone. And you know the loss of ozone, that's not good for our skin. And such a ozone hole, sometimes is it referred to, can also move to Europe, depending on the weather conditions. Yeah, weather conditions. And this brings me to the example of French-German cooperation. So here, this is a weather forecast. See it a few years ago, but it can also be this year. Here you see a swell of warm air masses penetrating to the Arctic Ocean, to Svalbard. And this is a typical pattern we observe at the unusual high temperatures. So in Svalbard, it was already mentioned. There we have the RVPEF station. So this is a collaboration between the Institut Polaire Français Paul-Émile Victor, IPEF, and the Alfred Wegener Institute. And they are working together on, they have research questions on glacial processes, permafrost processes, what's going on in the atmosphere. And there's also logistical support. And please want to welcome Maria Montorilli, sitting over there. She is the coordinator from the German side of this research station. And don't hesitate to contact her after this event here. Yeah, some outcomes from the research in Svalbard. So what we see in the global focus that we have a warming, the surface air temperatures are warming annually, and specifically during winter, even stronger. There's a warming of 1.5 1.5 degrees per year. And we can also see this in the frozen ground, which I will come on in the last part of the talk. So in the permafrost, that is also warming. Yeah, it's a wonderful situation in Spitzbergen. I had the pleasure to be there 2 years ago, and this is a fjord setting with tidal glaciers coming into the fjords, and also some mountain glaciers, similar to that what I've shown from the Alps. And a French colleague, Madeleine Gilselin, she mapped the retreat of glaciers there. So that's evident. So we have this glacier retreat worldwide, and also on Spitzbergen, and more expressed, of course, in Greenland. Yeah, what does it mean? So glacial retreat, so this means the ice which is grounded on the continents. When this ice melts, it goes to the ocean and it causes sea level rise. So today we have a sea level rise of 3 millimeters per year. And 1/2 of this is attributed to the thermal expansion of water, and the other sea level rise is coming from the glaciers. Specifically, we think of the Arctic, it's from Greenland. And here, the projection, what might be expected in future. So we still have 70 to 75 meters ice left, which might contribute to a sea level rise. Greenland might be thawing. This means 6 to 7 meters sea level rise, and Antarctica is a quite stable system since 35 million years. But also there are parts which are sensitive to climate change, and these parts in Western Antarctica, for instance, can also contribute 4 to 5 meters of sea level rise in the next centuries if we don't take care. I'm a geologist, and I also have to tell you that during the last ice ages, when the glaciers covered the Berlin area here, the sea level was 140 meters dropped. But anyhow, we are not talking about geological timescales, we are talking about the present time. So this means what we can expect, 25 centimeters of sea level rise during the last century, that's enough to cause trouble for the humans on Earth. Yeah, another part of the cryosphere is sea ice. And you can see here that you can see nothing. So it's open water. So we have, normally, the Kongsfjord is covered by sea ice during winter, and it melts in spring. But now, during the last years, we always have no sea ice. And here, that's a typical scientific figure, a graph. You see here from left to right, the seasons through the year, and on the vertical scale, you see the extent of sea ice, and it's clear in winter, almost the full Arctic Ocean is covered by sea ice, and there's not so much variability in the course of global warming. But if you look in the summertime, that's here in the middle part, you see that there's a high variability of sea ice extent. And what we can observe is that during the last decade, we have repeated minima in summer sea ice extent. This year, so it's an exception actually this year, we are a bit higher. So it's not so less as we have in the foregoing years. Yeah, how does it look like? You can look on the Meereis portal. That's the outreach phenomenon where you can get information. So there's a summer ice during times when there was much summer ice. So when I was in the Alps and studied the glaciers there, the Arctic sea ice looked like this. And here, that's the impression of 2012 when the absolute minimum was reached. So the half of the sea ice coverage has gone during the last decades. And this has consequences for living conditions and for ecology, of course. Yeah, sea ice has another aspect. I just mentioned the polar amplification effect. And you have to imagine if you have white area, so white areas, so this means ice, sea ice especially, then snow and glacial ice, they are white and they reflect the sunlight. So during cold times, the bit of energy coming during summer from the sun is reflected back to the orbit. But now, in the course of the loss of sea ice, we have barren country and Arctic Ocean, dark areas, dark surfaces. And so we have a lot of absorption of sun warmth and energy. And this is given back to the atmosphere. So, and what we observed during the last years is that the atmospheric circulation is sluggish. So it's becoming a bit wavy. So that's very slowly operating. And this is a very nice situation also in the weather forecast. You see these meandering wind systems. And the important thing is that it, on the one hand, brings very cold air masses from the Arctic to the mid-latitudes. In Europe, for instance, we have very mild air masses. Can be also vice versa. Maybe you remember in the news in the US, Chicago, New York, we had minus 50 degrees during the last winters. It repeatedly happened. And on the other hand, we have very warm winters. And this possibly has to do with teleconnection. So causes from the Arctic, where we have two situations. So the scientists call this the North Atlantic Oscillation. But to keep it simple, so the normal situation we had in the past is that we have a capsule of cold air in the Arctic. So the Arctic is cold, the rest of the world is warmer. So it's an isolated system with strong gradients. And such an isolated system is manifested in the isolation of air masses and a strong the jet stream. We know that from if you're flying, but we do it now today. So, and the warming of the Arctic sluggish the circulation. So this means we have this effect that the cold air masses can penetrate far to the south, and on the other hand, mild air masses can conquer the higher latitudes. So the last part I want to tell you, so we talked about the ocean, and now, so that's important, the Arctic, it's basically an ocean surrounded by land masses, and the Antarctic is different. We have a continent, so that's also interesting if you look at climate change. So what we see here is the distribution of permafrost areas, also done by Hugues Blantuy in this wonderful project. And the permafrost is distributed exactly there where we had not so much ice during the last ice age. And this is a cold area since 2 million years approximately. And the permafrost, the frozen ground, is more than 1 kilometer thick in Siberia. So that's also a quite stable system, but the problem are the marginal areas of the permafrost regions and the surface. So, and here I'm also working in Siberia, and this how you can imagine a cold region. So that's a time minus 50 degrees. We are there in spring when it's only very cold and not extremely cold. We have sunlight. So this is how Siberia looks in wintertime. And if you go there in summer, you have temperatures now up several degrees higher than 30 degrees. So I experienced by myself 30 degrees, but this year it was even higher, and it caused all these wildfires. So, and what you can also see here is the surface of permafrost. So you have this ground ice in the underneath the surface, and the surface of permafrost thaws during summertime. So, and the warming means on the one hand to dry, to get wildfires, and on the other hand it's becoming wet. The problem is that the summers become more extended in time, and the penetration of the official thaw goes deeper into the ground. And this has consequences also for the carbon budget. So what you see here, that's a typical tundra landscape above here, and the thawing of permafrost on the surface. And the permafrost soils are refrigerator, where you have a lot of old carbon stored and also younger carbon. And if it's getting warmer, microbial life is stimulated. And this leads to the release of trace gases such as CO2 or methane, and they contribute to the greenhouse effect we already see. So we have this warming caused by human impact. The humans release trace gases to the atmosphere, increase the temperature, and then you have the response of the climate system, so the amplification effect, that the processes are running that cause another process, in this case, the release of trace gases from permafrost, and this adds on to the human impact of the gas. So that's all studied by my colleagues from the permafrost section, Guido Grosse, and they also have created here very nice figures for outreach work. Yeah, the final figure I want to show. So if we're talking about permafrost regions, Siberia, what's often forgotten also in the school is that it covers to a quarter of our northern hemisphere, and it takes you hours to fly over these regions. So that's covered by boreal forests, by taiga forests, and to the north we have the tundra stretches. So, and we have another group in Potsdam dealing with change in vegetation. And what they observe here, that's a typical situation across the tree line. So with global warming, we know it also from the past, the tree line moves up the mountains and also to the north, it advances. And what we can see today is that the warming front proceeds about 100 meters per year. So, for instance, a 10-degree condition in July is very important for this. And the tree line shifts are magnitude lower. And this is something which is a problem in our climate system with climate warming. So we have leads and lags, and we have acceleration and slowing of processes. So we are not sure at the moment what we have done so far. And another important thing is what we have done. This appears within a time scale, but it even takes longer to get back to the original situation. That's something we also learn as geologists from Earth history. So this brings me to my last slide. Here, the impression. So the Alfred Wegener Institute is situated in Bremerhaven, basically, but we also have sites distributed over Germany. And one is the AWI Potsdam, shown here, with 200 people, and that was founded in 1990. It was a polar reunification in Germany. So I have summarized again what I have told you, so I don't want to repeat it now. And thank you for listening. And of course, if you have more questions, it was very simplified, I have to admit. So if you have questions, then don't hesitate. Okay, after panel, yeah, that's good.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, if you have questions for me, we'll take them after the panel discussion, which you will also be a part of. Next, I would like to welcome to the stage Alexandre Lavellier and Semyon Gabyshev, who have just returned back from fieldwork in Yakutia. And yes, Alexandra is an associate professor in social and cultural anthropology, and Semyon Gabyshev is an Evenki reindeer herder and the first Siberian indigenous associate member of a French research institution. So please, welcome.
I'm always too small for this kind of stuff.
We are lucky today you can see my face at least. Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for this invitation. So this talk is a co-production between us. We were already presented and shows a few results from a study which started in 2013. The Arctic is inhabited and rich in cultures of these 100 and 10 indigenous peoples and so many languages and cultures. And those indigenous people have and had sustainable traditional economic that were able to keep the environment intact over thousands, centuries. And now, from the 20th century, we have an increasing increase of exploitation of gas, oil, gold, etc. So now Arctic environmental changes concerns human societies on the planet. And the indigenous people of Siberia are aware about that, and they say, as this reindeer herder, we all live in the same planet, we all breathe the same air. Everyone, not only scientists and indigenous people, needs to understand the environmental cost of intensive industrial development. How the Siberian indigenous people observe, understand climate change, they also observe a crescendo in changes. In 2010, they were telling the climate is increasingly hot. Now they say from 2018, the climate and the environment have lost all logic. And also a mantra you can hear in the interviews is so rapid and unexpected changes that it's difficult to adapt. They have, Siberian indigenous people, a meticulous understanding, knowledge about the environment, and a very global and holistic vision, which is focusing on the interactions between elements of the nature and human societies, be it Western ones or indigenous ones. As you can see in this diagram, they understand that the worldwide industry triggers, on the one hand, climate change, and on the other hand, mining development. Climate change is raising unprecedented anomalies, as we will see, in many domains, and mining development triggers the destruction of thousands hectares of biodiversity destroyed for centuries, which raise pollution of air, water, soil, affecting fauna and flora. And all of this together has a consequence, has consequences like loss of ecosystem services, endangerment of cultures, collapse of soils and infrastructure, methane fires in the tundra, epidemic, insects wearing infected by virus, deforestation, etc., etc., etc. So this is the vision of indigenous people, and all of this has an negative impact on the planet environment. This slide, this table, which is published in Ambio, summarize the changes in the climate and the environment from our community-based observatories from 2013 to 2021. And as you can see, they observe changes almost in all parts of the climate. You see humidity, prevailing wind, clouds, precipitation, also in the river ice, in the sunshine, the quality of sunshine according to the seasons, and also an important increase of different types of extreme events. And the Evenki link these changes in climate with other change in plant phenology. They observe domestic reindeer health, predators population, insect reproductive cycle, biodiversity, cryosphere, and also they link it to an increase in earthquakes. This slide is just to show you what kind of richness you can have for science when you listen to the indigenous knowledge. This is all the thing, you see the, oops, sorry. Yeah, this is the different parts of knowledge you can have if you listen to the indigenous knowledge. This is another example of the indigenous knowledge about the circulation of air, humidity from the ground, from the sky, through the snowpack, and the interaction with the density of vegetal cover. Here, this is the anomaly they observe. So a densification of the vegetation of shrub growth, which interact with the humidity within the snowpack, with the temperature within the snowpack, and all of this is indigenous knowledge. In social sciences, it's often said that indigenous people of the Arctic do not have the notion of extreme or extreme event because they are living in a harsh environment. But is it still the case from 2005 with the increase of climate change? It doesn't work anymore. What is the next slide? Sorry, oops. Okay, oops. Okay, so according to our study, we analyzed with the indigenous people several seasons, normal and abnormal, and we found that indigenous, Siberian indigenous people have a notion of norm, which admits variations. You see the type of variations, and also if those variations are too significant or too regular, it becomes anomalies. Also, within this category of anomalies, indigenous understanding of it, there is known anomalies. So the indigenous knowledge understand the notion of anomalies, but also more and more unprecedented anomalies that was never seen during a generation or during previous generation. So it creates an anxiety, a panic, and the notion, the expression you find in many interviews, the nature is broken, which is very strong. Because before they said, nature is varying, it's normal. Now, really, you find, how is your environment? You're asking, people say the environment is broken. And also they have an indigenous understanding of extreme event we will develop. If anomalies continuously repeat or goes over their limit, it creates an extreme weather event, according to the understanding of Siberian indigenous people. It is determined by an annual repetition of the same anomalies. It is, or it can be an anomaly which lasts too long, or an accumulation of anomalies of different type. So here is a comparison between the different understanding of extreme event, and in consequence, the consequence is most extreme events or extreme processes noticed by Evenki or by other indigenous people in the Arctic are not noticed, recorded by science or identified as such. We have studied this perception of extreme weather, extreme process among this population, and we identified 3 types of extreme processes. One is weather, okay, that's clear. The second, we will explain with Mr. Gabyshev, is extreme nature process. It is when you have weather plus environmental problem. And the third category is hybrid extreme process, when you have weather, environment plus non-natural factor. We will explain this. So, with an example that will be illustrated by Mr. Gabyshev, we talk now about the extreme nature process. So when you have weather and nature.
No, it can read Mosaic manasong toljakutan, rastation baingal nan
now there is a trend of more and more deep snow cover, which triggers densification of the vegetal cover, and then it facilitates the attacks from predators. As a consequence, many herds have disappeared from 2006. And in addition to this, there is a problem because international organizations do not allow us to regulate this population, which is becoming really too numerous. This picture from, as you say in the legend, shows this is only a part of what a wolf can do in one night. So here you see the wolf is attacking a calf, then the mother comes to the calf and the wolf can kill the mother also. This is a strategy of wolves to cancel herd.
Jebon na borot anyin man tidirik tinen kanin muchuf kinin tidium min.
The wolves are using the link between calves and female to kill more animals.
Boga manatal chop chawulcha.
The natural environment is broken. The natural environment have lost its logic.
Bayurnan manabjara aldoladu kukanocha.
There is less and less wild reindeer fish.
Chapkashar untole mashal.
We see the new species of birds.
Kurkana arol nan mashal ashab bin kitin.
We see the arrival of unprecedentedly not seen eagles we never seen before. Also, we see a lot of insects that we never seen before. There is also this category, Mr. Gabishev says, of the hybrid extreme process when you have accumulated anomalies in climate or weather, predator population and industrial development. So please look at the diagram I will show in the course of its explanation. Yeah. No, tara.
Tara kun kana pagoda man ni jaran kana. Pararod I paramusulmism man.
So when you have this cumulated weather, nature, and non-natural factor, it's becoming really too much. When you have extractive industry coming to a land, you have the use of mercury and cyanide in a land which is poisoning a territory for several dozen of years. So this land will take around at least 50 years to recover because there is no rehabilitation by the enterprise. And it's understandable that the flora and fauna are cancelled. And also the domestic wild reindeer are going out from this territory. And the domestic reindeer are getting ill and decreasing. And as a consequence, some reindeer herding family are leaving this activity, this traditional activity, and joining the village where you have a huge unemployment. And the ones who can continue reindeer herding are moving to a new land, new nomadic land. And anyway, the extractive industry will someday join this new land of nomads, and the process is repeating and repeating. On the picture here, you had this very typical for us, what we call an indigenous type of landscape called Amnunna, which is a very large river basin, very useful for many activities. And you see now this was completely destroyed. You have only sand and stones. In such territories, there is no rehabilitation, and the nature after that is completely transformed. You have only willows growing up. And when you have a vegetal cover from only willow, you have a lot of encephalitic born tick. Yeah. And there is no large, and other trees. And it's in such destroyed territories, the cows, the reindeer cows, are very sensitive to the attack of big birds. And from the wolves also. And also you can see, this is me adding, you see here the many reindeer are sinking in the chemical quicksand created by gold mines, and this is really repeated activity. And yes, you have entire herds disappearing in such chemical quicksand. And you can see that when extractive industries are working, they are leaving their waste instead, and it's winding the reindeer. Here you can see in the picture a reindeer was wounded by this industrial waste. The reindeer herders could treat it, it recovered, but in the winter it was killed by wolves. And it's a common scenario. Why I told about all of that, because the reindeer are very important in featuring the landscape, because they are featuring the landscape, the vegetal cover, and the reindeer are essential for the taiga. As you can understand, when you have so many pressures, in addition to climate change, in addition to environmental changes, the people then say in their language, dabde, say it's difficult, you feel like to give up. This slide is summarizing a part of our research. As you can see here, yes, it's indigenous knowledge within which you have an understanding of norms, known anomalies, and then outside these unprecedented anomalies. Then you have the extreme process, which are created by repeated and extended known anomalies, but also some unprecedented anomalies. And as we have seen, the most biggest pressure is appearing when human activities are added to this. And then in terms of knowledge to adapt, you have knowledge for adaptation within the indigenous knowledge. You have also creation of new knowledge on the basis of traditional knowledge in order to adapt, but you have also this limit when people say, pass from endeavoring to adapt to it's impossible to adapt. When you lose in one night 30 or 50 reindeer, so half of your herd, you understand that here you feel like to give up. Nevertheless, for the moment, they're still resisting and they want to live. As a conclusion, we want to say that indigenous knowledge notion of extreme event is not based on a vague knowledge, but on a precise science-like knowledge. And also these studies prove that the systematic character of this indigenous understanding of climate change, including industrial development, just like IPCC report does. And it reveals the existence of an indigenous characteristic of extreme, which is perhaps new. And it proves also the pressure which exacerbates the vulnerability of indigenous peoples comes from Western human societies. And therefore, this Evenki science that we have shown encourages Western sciences to revisit the notion of extreme more generally, according to the viewpoints of different cultures and lifestyle. And the official recognition of tech, a traditional ecological knowledge, as a science and indigenous observation in international reports like IBES or IPCC could offer a better assessment of the many impacts of change in climate and the environment, and to document all scales, so to have a realistic impact of climate change. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite the panelists to join me on stage to talk about the importance of international and transdisciplinary cooperation in light of Arctic climate change. We have Bernhard Diekmann, Alexandre Lavillier will also join, and Simeon Gabishev will join me again. And also on stage, well, I think I'll switch microphones as I'm. And testing this one out. And so to my right is Jacques Raharianivo, who is the Deputy Ambassador for Polar and Maritime Issues with the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Jacques is working on Arctic issues, such as the 4th Arctic Science Ministerial, which will be hosted by Russia and France in 2023. Thank you for joining me on stage. And to my left is Veli-Pekka Tynkkynen, a professor of Russian Environmental Studies at the Aleksanteri Institute, the Finnish Center for Russian and East European Studies at the University of Helsinki. And he is a geographer focusing on how natural resources are governed and who decides how geographical space is used in Russia. Thank you all for joining this discussion this evening. Perhaps the first question for you, Jacques. Climate change has remained at the top of mind despite the ongoing global pandemic. How has international cooperation regarding the Arctic changed in the past 2 years?
Well, thank you, Grace, and good evening, everybody. If you are referring to years 2020 and 2021, first of all, the work on Arctic climate change has been affected the way, I guess, the rest of the world has been affected, with travel being banned and people needing to meet virtually, maybe in a more extreme degree, because when you have to organize a VTC with people across 16 time zones or more, is more challenging than in some other regions. But beyond that, I think also that if we look back at the last 2 years, the Arctic within the climate change agenda has become more and more a bold headline. I mean, the public awareness has clearly increased. Last summer, when all across the world, newspapers and TV channels were mentioning the first training at the North Pole, I was wondering if weather reports from the Arctic used to be, but widely publicized earlier, even in the recent past. And closely entangled with that public awareness, I guess, we can also see an increased political commitment. We will see in just a few weeks at the COP26 in Glasgow what will be the place of the Arctic issues on the international climate agenda. But I can already see that it's not possible anymore to overlook it or mention the Arctic in the footnote only. And I think that's clearly a trend which is here to stay.
Bernhard, you highlighted some very dramatic changes happening in the Arctic. I was wondering if you could weigh in on how significant international and cross-disciplinary collaboration is for science and protection of the Arctic.
Yeah, as I imagine a talk, the processes going on the Arctic, they have worldwide effects. So we have to work together on this, and you also have to consider we have the people living with the change. Yeah, that's the countries around the Arctic, and we have other countries which might have the expertise to study all these things. And the important thing is both. So we have to do joint activities, projects. One example is the Mosaic project. So it was possible beyond all the political aspects, to bring together all the people who are affected by these environmental changes. And they all together have the goal to look for what is going on. And this brings me to the next aspect. So we have to talk about all these changes at a common level. So if you look at the natural scientists, they are looking at the processes going on. They want to understand the physics. And they tell the people what's going on. And now we have the social scientists. They are more interested in what are the effects of all these processes which we know. And so we can tell them what's going on, and they have to develop new ideas how to overcome the situation. And the other level is also not scientists versus scientists. So that's what we're doing together, so social scientists and natural scientists. We also have to consider the perception. So that's the motto of our evening. So we have the people, the scientists understand all the research aspects. Then we have to include the decision makers like politicians. So we now have the new election of our government that plays an important role. And we also have to consider the multiplicators. So these are the people who have to be educated, so we have to do the knowledge transfer to the young people. And this already starts in school. So we have to take all this knowledge into the normal lectures in school that not achieved so far everywhere. Then we have the students. We have to interest the students, and such a graduate program is a very welcome occasion to do so. And so we can talk each other, so from the different scientific views and also from the educational level and from our tasks in the private lab and also in our business.
Veli-Pekka, the changes in the Arctic climate have some major economic implications as well. What political and security challenges are you seeing?
Yes, it's a big issue, and I was thinking about when listening to these very interesting presentations about what a social scientist should say to the politicians and propose how to, yes, engage with the challenges of climate change, but at the same time also mitigate against the security threats, which of course also are real in the Arctic. It's not only Arctic changing and ice melting, but also there's a military tensions there for decades have been there. And luckily, you could say that if you think of the last decade kind of security developments between, for example, Russia, China, and the West, the Arctic, at least there are conflicts and there are disagreements elsewhere, but at least the Arctic has tried to be or remain outside these conflicts. Of course, it hasn't been very successful, but at least if you look at, for example, Russia is trying to argue that let's do business in the Arctic. Of course, that's related to their interest in the energy world, in extracting more oil and gas. But the Arctic is an interesting area where you could actually find new ways for detente between the West and Russia. And actually, what I would of course propose as a social scientist, as a geographer, and looking at the energy world, to how to combat these problems that we actually heard just today about the melting Arctic, but also these, for example, different industries impacting the people in the north. Of course, it's our products, what we're talking about. It's our gold, it's our gasoline, it's our gas. We are the consumers. And we're talking now here as if it's something, a different world. No, it's the end of the line, so to say. It's extracted there, and the consequences are there. Of course, there are global consequences also, but very many, when you extract these different commodities in the Arctic, they impact directly also the local communities. And we have, as consumers of these, end consumers of these products, we have responsibility. And actually that comes to, for example, the issues of EU's Green Deal, carbon tax, and these kind of issues that actually we should engage with the rest of the world, but especially with Russia, because most of these products that impact Arctic very severely are of Russian origin. Then, for example, the issue of Green Deal and Arctic, this carbon tax, that today we're discussing that the carbon tax should include businesses of fertilizers and steel and so forth. That's a good beginning. But what we really do need is a carbon tax that touches oil and gas. And that's by far Arctic. And that is the way we should move in the future.
Speaking of the local communities, Alexandra and Simeon, you've just returned from Siberia. I'm curious to know from both of you what changes you've seen just in the past few years.
Ça marche.
كانت بول لان نبتغى يكون изменения نورن كنا بيتوك это بيل يجركنا تالي من студентов как виндер как правильно бил виндер хотели же обмен студентов делать благо который подышит университет уральный ведь канторы сами печатные авалык тежем тоже вот так это кое как-то
The most recent change, I would say, many projects we had with students couldn't take place because of the COVID situation. So even the local research is yeah. What we noticed for the last few years is really an important increase in humidity and moisture of the air. We also noticed that this moisture is accumulating on the trees, creating both pores on it, and also what they call kumnuk, which is a package of snow glued on the tree, which is in some period normal, but here the last winter it was too much. And also this summer they noticed everywhere in his village and also in the other village I have seen an important set of different illnesses among the reindeer.
Раньше было 40 градусов, как 20 градусов, это кантор 40 градусов, это охота лагнитомат, это сильно
In the 80s, beginning of the 2000s, minus 40 was almost nothing to bear. It was normal temperature, even sometimes hot. But now, minus 35 is frozen chicken, chick frozen, sorry. And the feeling of really of frost. Yeah. And for instance, this winter, all the nomads who are very used to travel had the chick frozen, even if they were.
А вот если летнее время, то как бы, то летом, если кульме, то душно, ночь, невыносимо, раньше никто не бережет.
And also new for the last few years is the summer where you feel the, I don't know how to translate, when it's hot and humid. I don't know if the Russian speakers, it's hot and humid. And even many, in all the interview, people say it was difficult to breathe. Not only because of the smoke from the forest fires, but when you didn't have this forest fire, they said it was difficult to breathe.
I'm also curious what the future looks like for the children growing up in this area. Does that look very different from what their parents might have expected?
Ну, нарортамало жер надулты, конечно, текел жаум, кан утел барпуса, эжектин кан, но если оркател жер, то возможно, то айоджа, галарно штоктер, боганун, укчабжа, аялыгин.
He said, now we observe a decrease an important decrease in the reindeer population, but it happened in the past and it could recover, because as we have seen in the Yamal, you can see a very big decrease and then recovering of the herd. But it depends also very much about the environment. The environment is also very much affecting, allowing or not the recovering of the reindeer herd. And he wishes the children will continue, but of course, if the reindeer are decreasing, there is a wish among young generation to continue for part of it, and the other want to have, let's say, a modern life with big salaries. But this culture, as a symbol, reindeer is still very important, even for them, for those who do not continue directly to manage to work with reindeer. And also, you see, even if some youth want to have a big salary, buy important items from the consumption, etc., always you have this willing to go back to the taiga and to have traditional activities such as hunting, gathering, etc. So this link with nature, even if living a urban or village life, is still very strong.
Russia will be co-hosting the next Arctic Science Ministerial with France. Jacques, is there anything that you can share with us about this so far?
Well, actually, I know some of you here in Berlin were involved in the second Arctic Science Ministerial meeting 3 years ago or so. So it's one of the major gathering of scientists involved with the Arctic issues. The latest one was the so-called ASM3, which was postponed due to the COVID and eventually held online from Tokyo mid-spring this year. Indeed, Russia, the country which took the chairmanship of the Arctic Council from May 2021 for 2 years, asked France as an observer country to the Arctic Council to co-host that forthcoming fourth Arctic Science Ministerial meeting. The details of that meeting actually will be unveiled in 10 days from now in Iceland during the Arctic Circle meeting. There will be a formal handover from Japan and Iceland to France and Russia. So stay tuned for the precisions. However, the important point to remember about such a format is that it's now a standard for a non-Arctic country like Germany or France, to be, I would say, offer the lead in organizing such a major event, international event. You may remember what a wide and big meeting it was here in Berlin, not only a meeting, but also workshops and exhibitions. Despite our countries can't claim to be Arctic countries, they are acknowledged and accepted as major, I would say, major countries as far as Arctic science is concerned. And it's, in my view, it's closely linked to what we discussed earlier, that definitely what is happening in the Arctic is everybody's concern.
That research brings me back to Bernhard. You were mentioning some of the collaborative programs in Arctic science. I'm curious if the priorities or methods for collaboration on science projects have changed from what you've seen in recent years?
Yeah, maybe I can summarize this with a gain of knowledge, with a huge gain of knowledge. But maybe I can give evidence for this with our Russian-German collaboration. So when we started the studies here in Potsdam, we had some connection to Russia, and we started to work in Antarctica in the 90s, and then we had the big chance to go to Siberia. And during that time in the 90s, Siberia was a white spot on the landscape. So there was a lot of knowledge in Russia itself, and now we had the exchange of our expertise. And so what we gained during all this time, so we did monitoring over the years, so more than 25 years. So we get more and more data which support our findings through time, so that we can surely say there's something going on. Then what also changed is the way of collaboration. So in Germany, we work together with other institutions, and our research in Russia fostered also the connections in Russia itself. So you have the big institutions in St. Petersburg and Moscow, and now we are also including the universities of Siberia. So this is very important, this combination, and also, again, as in the first question, so outreach activities become more important, and the technological advances. So we have one big advantage with our research. So we can go to the field. So that's the real advantage to go there, and a privilege to go there, and we can look at the site, on site, what's going on. And now we have developed new methods in the last years. So this means we go to some kind of remote sensing. So that's looking at satellite pictures or using drones from the landscape. And so we do an upscaling from the field observation, spot observation, to an overall view. And the final step is to provide these data into computer models. So a similar approach as we had for Mosaic. And this takes time. And we now have a very good progress in this. And that's basically what changed. And the way of our collaboration. So we like personally each other over the years, and that's very good. I love to go to Russia, sit at the fire camp in the evening, change the guitars among others, and singing songs. So that's the other side of science in the field.
Veli-Pekka, I'm curious, in terms of environmental policy in Russia, is international collaboration having an effect on that in light of climate change affecting the whole planet?
I was listening to your examples of how you're collaborating with the Russian scholars. It's really, I really envy you, because what we in the social sciences and political sciences have confronted during the last, especially the last 5-10 years, is totally the opposite, unfortunately. That we cannot really do research together with the Russians concerning the environmental policy and, for example, energy policy research, which would be highly important to have those steps in the field of politics, to change the course, to decarbonize our societies. And I actually also have worked in this bigger consortium focusing on Arctic change, and there's natural scientists and social scientists, political scientists, and I really kind of envy that on the natural sciences side, there's been for decades of cooperation between Russians and Western scholars. And that's the way where we should also strive for within social sciences, trying to come up with, as I mentioned in my previous talk, that we should come up with ways of gaining knowledge on what kind of side effect, what kind of environmental externalities are being produced when the products that we Europeans buy, come from Brasilia, Africa, or Russia, and we should know what happens on the way. And this is our task within social and political sciences when it comes to environmental issues, because that's the future, that's what we have to do. And unfortunately, this work with the Russian scholars hasn't been very fruitful. But luckily, yes, we have, we have political initiatives within, for example, EU, the carbon tax I mentioned already, but that's not bold enough. We need, for example, certificates that we find in mining, we find certificates, environmental certificates in forestry, but unfortunately, we haven't seen these certificates, for example, in hydrocarbon industries concerning oil and gas. Because if we think of what are the major Arctic environmental problems, mining we heard of, but actually on having a global impact is the hydrocarbon industries, not only when we are consuming gasoline globally, but also that industry in the Arctic is polluting the Arctic via, for example, flaring of so-called associated petroleum gas when oil is pumped from the ground. And that soot, that black carbon from that flaring is impacting the Arctic very heavily. It varies. There are scientists that say that actually up to a quarter of Arctic warming, the extra warming, is caused by this soot that is settling on the ice. And this is something that relates to me as a political scientist, social scientist, that how we should develop our systems, what we should propose for politicians, how to curtail this problem. And that is, for example, introducing these ecological certificates into oil and gas business to promote those companies who do their business well, who do not flare, who do not spill oil into the environment, and so forth. And actually, that is a very wise policy if you want to decarbonize the global, economy, because today the factor is that oil and gas business, first and foremost, the environmental externalities are that the reason why they can spill oil and flare gas is that there's no pressure to curtail that. And then, of course, the product that they're selling, they can sell it with a bigger price. And if those externalities would be in the price of oil and gas, for example, it would be more expensive. It would be more competitive for renewable energies worldwide to compete against hydrocarbon industries. And this concerns especially Russia, which is highly dependent on fossil energy. But at the same time, Russia has, for example, huge potential in renewable energies, but it's not using it because the oil and gas sector is subsidized in so many ways. And one of the ways of subsidizing are these environmental externalities, which are not included in the price when oil and gas is produced. These kind of issues, for example.
A lot of those topics are things that the EU Commission and Parliament are considering as they revisit their Arctic policy this year. I was wondering, report from a rapporteur believes that the Arctic is going to play a critical role in Europe's future, and that the EU has to reconsider the Arctic in its geopolitical strategy. What do you think will come from this?
Well, yes, indeed. We are expecting the new EU Arctic strategy to be made public later this month. I was told today that it's still circulating among some high-level offices in Brussels. But what we already know is the outcome of the public consultation conducted less than a year ago in preparation of that new strategy. So that's what the citizens and the stakeholders expect from that strategy. They expect the EU to address the climate change issues and safeguarding the Arctic environment. They expect the EU to ensure sustainable development in the Arctic and around the Arctic, keeping in mind that part of the EU territory is actually Arctic territory, namely in Finland, northern Finland and Sweden. But maybe even more important is that they also expect more international cooperation about the Arctic. To what extent that can be interpreted as opposed to more confrontation remains to be seen. But it's, to my mind, already very significant. And then again, I will maybe join some previous speakers. When you read that the EU should revisit the way it considers the Arctic, I mean, we are all victims of those geographical maps in schoolrooms, where the Arctic is just split over the upper edge of the sheet, and we believe that it's what it is not, basically. And that's exactly what we have to, the misconception we have to correct. There again, the EU as such has definitely a role to play. It's one piece of the global game.
In terms of the international collaboration, I was curious, with the two of you have collaborated for many years. What advice might you have for how scientists and indigenous communities can work better together?
Конечно, чтобы если ты домом только Jamaican, чтобы Валдамин, что Россия обкатывает месяц Валдеяб, то Боговор мутил спасать ее. Если это Кавалдер, то Боговор еще хуже обкандея.
This is very important to work together between different countries and with Russia, and together to think how to preserve the environment.
Он овал джара, если обкатывал, если аяму дуржил джара, то и Гренуэль да, Мартин да, студентил да, обкатывал, то тоже муконда валун нарпо.
I would advise, I wish that, he said, that everybody will work together, scientists from hard sciences, environmental sciences, from social sciences, politicians, students, youth, will work and think together how to make a better Arctic, and indigenous people, of course, included in this discussion, because we are very good observers of what is happening daily, and we are wishing to, we understand this is me, I think.
Нутиканун, ищем, что Боговор спасать джар, другу чем покажет.
Only a collective thinking of all generation, all profession, including indigenous people, can find a solution with politicians also to preserve the Arctic, the environment. And I can add from my fieldwork as a social anthropologist that I was really surprised to see the indigenous people living in those, let's say, victims of industrial development, telling that, yes, of course, we understand that our countries need these industries for their own economy. Of course, Russia and other countries need this extractive industry for their own economy. And if we have a country which is healthy economically, we will have good villages, good infrastructure, and so far. So you see, here again, they have a very global vision and realistic.
Но еще аябимте, если тор государство, балетим телтор конференции бонет канер обджер, студент, ученый, профессор. И даже вот для него Дилден Мартин эмудимте.
And but what they have also is that they would wish to see governments or enterprises to have a much better behavior toward the recovering, the rehabilitation after such industry. It is possible, just a little bit more effort. It is definitely possible, and with the advice of indigenous people, because they are very clearly understanding the logic of the global economy. He added that perhaps this kind of discussion efforts can be done through conferences, joining students, politicians, thinking all together and use students around this, how, let's say, to think together how to improve, to help the Arctic environment to recover from these activities.
I'm curious, this could be a question for Veli-Pekka or for Jacques. What do you think needs to happen to ensure continued peace in the Arctic?
Well, that's a big question. But I think that the previous speaker actually touched this issue that I already talked about, that how we clean up things, how we manage the Arctic. It's that we build systems that we know what is happening in the Arctic. Now, for example, coming to my baby, the hydrocarbon industry, we know very little about the methane emissions, for example. We know something about the oil spills, but we do not know exact volumes. We know that their extractive industries are causing these effects in the Arctic, but we don't have tools how to manage them and to favor those companies who do not do things like that. And of course, this is, in a way, I don't know if it's the right answer to the question that how we can promote peace in the Arctic and how can we promote global peace. I think it's related to this issue that we, as consumers, become aware what happens when we consume something. We know the flows that they arrive at our house, what has happened for those commodities on the way from production to transport to your consumption. And I think this is, of course, something that has to happen on a global scale. It's not only EU that can do this. I think it has to be, especially North America, China has to take this. But of course, we Europeans can lead the way. And I believe that these kind of certificates, by raising the bar, so to say, all the time concerning carbon emissions, but also other externalities concerning social and environmental effects, that is the way towards a better future. I don't know if it's peaceful, but I think it's also more peaceful. Again, coming from my discipline of geography, if I think of petrostates of today, we look at Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Nigeria, not very democratic countries. And all these countries are highly dependent on hydrocarbons, which are easy to control, easy to maintain the money in the pocket of very few in the elite. If you look at the world of renewables, their infrastructures are diverse. They're not concentrated. You cannot keep the money in the pockets of few. And I think this has very much to do with also global security and peace, and not only in the Arctic, but elsewhere.
Well, no, very briefly, I can but second what has been said. First of all, definitely there is an issue with knowledge about the Arctic. Maybe it hasn't been underlined enough earlier, but one huge point is that we still lack a lot of data which are essential to understanding not only the Arctic but a global phenomenon. And therefore, indeed, we do need to share efforts, especially in the scientific field. That's where international cooperation is more than needed in the Arctic. Now, as far as your question about how to preserve peace in the Arctic is concerned, honestly, if I knew how to preserve peace, I would certainly tell it. My view is that the Arctic is, however, a rather peaceful region of today's world, luckily. But if I rephrase it in another way, how could we prevent the Arctic from being another conflict area in the near future? And indeed, some factors may contribute to, if not creating conflicts, at least increasing tensions. And that's certainly something which should be avoided. I mentioned earlier the Arctic Council. It doesn't deal with so-called hard security issues, but there are other formats, other dialogues between countries to be supported in order to avoid to reach such a situation, I would say.
Yes, please.
Just, I wanted to add a comparison in our Master 2, interdisciplinary master led by Jan about Arctic studies. We have a lot of African students from Nigeria, from Ghana, etc. And they straightly see that what is now starting to happen in the Arctic is reminding them what happened at the beginning in Africa. And they made several theses about this comparison Africa-Arctic, and they are very worried about, oh, please, don't do the same with Arctic that we did with Africa.
Such as you mean colonialism?
No,
yeah.
no colonialism, but to use land as, let's say, a rubbish for extractive industries. So for them, you feel they are very sensitive to this topic, and they see, they foresee the same schemes. So when you talked about Nigeria, I was thinking about that. They are very worried about that.
Do we have time to take some questions from the audience still? Perhaps if anybody has a burning question that they would love to ask the audience while we're all here, if it's just a media burning question, we can discuss it after the reception. In the meantime, I think we are heading up on 8 o'clock at this point. So I just have one last question maybe for everyone, if you have a few words. How can transdiscipline work help solve the problems of Arctic climate change for future generations? I realize that's just the biggest question of the entire night. It's a little ridiculous, but you know, just some final words from anyone who would like to add some.
Yeah, I think I already answered this question in my first comment. So we have to get at a similar level of understanding and communication, and then we can hopefully overcome the problems. Yeah, that's the basic goal of transdisciplinarity.
I think that's a very good question, because typically the academia has been thought of some kind of ivory tower that we scientists are saying something and then everyone should listen. And the transdisciplinary approach is exactly against this, in that sense that what actually you are doing is very much transdisciplinary, that you're actually engaging in different ways of producing knowledge. And that's the way forward if we want to kind of engage the community and societies in a broad scale. Otherwise, we will remain an ivory tower, and that's not a good future.
Any comments from you on the right side of me?
No, no, главное, что бу коренной житель укатал даже вот сунюл фермер бус элбус маневр делал бактерным гора арбар каравар штаб дун артен домашний живо дун вот не сидят. Тарыл между прочим мама тысячев. Главное, чтобы культура язык манил бредет аммаджер. Вот главное.
He said that the most important for the future and the future adaptation is for us to keep the language, the knowledge about the environment, how it functions, because it's tools for understanding, for adapting also. And he said, not only us in the Arctic, reindeer-herders, but you have different economies, but you have also farmers, and this knowledge is a treasure that must be transmitted and developed from generation to generation.
I think that's a beautiful way to wrap up this discussion. Thank you so much. Please give my guests here a round of applause for their expertise for speaking with us this evening. And so now we will head into the last portion of the program, the inauguration of the graduate school. You can feel free to join the audience as you were. As has been mentioned this evening, this new graduate school is a hallmark of the Franco-German cooperation. And so I would like to call to the stage to speak more about that, Olivier Mintz, Jan Bohm, and Klaus Großfeld, please.
The Arctic has increasingly been in the headlines in recent years. This is partly because of the severe repercussions from global warming for the climate and therefore for humankind and the environment. The Arctic is regarded as an early warning system for climate change. Its fragile environment is undergoing tremendous changes, and these in turn have a great impact on people living in Arctic regions. There are both positive and negative aspects to these changes. On the one hand, they are giving rise to opportunities for economic development, but on the other hand, they pose a threat to the vulnerable ecosystems. The Franco-German Graduate School is responding to these challenges with the support of outstanding institutions by providing accurate scientific information for both public debate and political discourse. Your graduate school enables junior researchers to establish an international network and to benefit from the combined expertise at institutions in Germany and France. Today especially, it is vitally important to benefit from international approaches and different methods from science and the humanities. We fund doctoral students during research stays in the partner country in order to provide them with the maximum support to start their international career and to develop an interdisciplinary network. The evaluation of the dossier of the graduate school, because each candidate is evaluated by two external evaluators from France and Germany. The main positive aspect of this graduate school was seen in the focus on interdisciplinarity. Let me make just a small point on this issue, because I think we are in a very paradoxical situation in higher education. We find more and more small-scale disciplinary focuses. Huge disciplines are more and more divided into very specialized disciplinary branches and ivory towers. Concurrence is at first place. We already heard today from university rankings. We know everything about publish or perish, and national ideologies have already also been mentioned tonight. So concurrence is at first place, and in that point, complementarity, and to see that we can benefit from each other, that we, in being together and being interdisciplinary, we would be much more efficient in our higher educational world. Unfortunately, when you ask for vacancies, you will never see, or very rarely see, a position which is declared as particularly as interdisciplinary. Mostly it is very specialized. So this Franco-German interdisciplinary graduate school on climate change in the Arctic is indispensable in overcoming the enormous challenges that face us and in inspiring young scientists whose role will be as experts in their field. I'm sure that the workshop that is already running since Sunday is a complete success, and wish you, the young researchers, the best accompaniment during the next years. Live your interdisciplinarity. We're extremely happy to support you in this regard.
Yeah, as representing the Alfred Wegener Institute, it's a great honor and pleasure for us to foster this joint effort between the UVSQ and the RV under the head and umbrella of the DFU and DFH. And so we are very happy that we now start this new effort in graduate education for the next 4 years. So, and with this, we hope that our young PhD students from both institutions and also from external universities may find really these efforts which we heard and the positive things we heard from the podium. They gave the right words. What is needed in the near future to overcome the challenges given to us by climate change. So we are very happy and with give the words to Jan Born, and then afterwards we will call up our first enrolled PhDs to hand them their certificates.
Okay, thank you, Klaus. So just a very brief comment on this evening and looking ahead. So we're celebrating 10 years of cooperation and support from the Franco-German University. We're very happy to open this graduate school. We have students here from German institutions, from French institutions. We have one student from the Ukraine who's going to come up here. And we're just about to sign an agreement to have a co-directed PhD with a student from Yakutsk. Our hope at UVSQ Paris-Saclay and at AVI, I'm sure also, is that these programs will accommodate also indigenous students, welcome indigenous students. We need to find ways to do this. We need also support programs to bring indigenous students to our institutions for some time, maybe not whole years, whatever, that's our academic problem of organizing this. But let's hope that we can extend this to be also in touch with the indigenous young people of the Arctic. I think it's a real challenge, and Alexander is not going to contradict me that we are going to work on this in the next 10 years. So thank you. And please, for the students to come up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now we would like to call our students. It's Ivana Knief. Please come down to us. Ivana. Florent Tins. Florent. Unfortunately, Alexandre and Edda couldn't make it. One is still in the US. And
yes, he's doing service in the US as a French language assistant at college.
and Edda is in Strasbourg.
She's teaching in Strasbourg.
She's right. So then our students from Alfred Wegener, Moritz Zeising, and Finn Ole Heukamp, and Mara Deutert. And two other students, Mengli Chao and Jean-Vincent Arnaud Nicolas, they are already still on a workshop in Italy, so it's conflicting interests, so they are, but nevertheless. Right. So, maybe you would like to hand over? Come on, here. Okay, yes.
Okay, to quote a British diplomat in Finland during a recent conference, I'm the man who's standing in between you and the drinks and the food downstairs, so I'll make it very short. Thank you for everyone to have been with us here tonight on this event. It's very exciting to have real events again with real people who can exchange and also participate in the social events. I'd like to thank our moderator, Grace, for an excellent job. Thank you. I would like to thank again, first of all, the French Embassy for co-organizing this event. Many thanks to you, to the Franco-German University, of course, to the organizing team. And let's celebrate now.